Well, first, I just want to start off by saying thank you definitely to Marketing Ops and the MO Pros team for allowing me to be here today and to talk about lead scoring. And then secondly, I just wanted to say thank you to everybody, all the participants who came in to listen to the session today. See a lot of familiar faces, got a lot of the remotish crew in here. So thank you to the team for showing the support, as well as a lot of people that I've seen and interacted with, thought leaders themselves in the LinkedIn space. So it's very nice to see all the familiar faces, and I really appreciate your time today. So we are going to be talking about advanced lead scoring in HubSpot. Lead scoring is something that I'm dealing with on a very regular basis. That's one of the top requests that come in from our clients, is centered around lead scoring and how to use that and deploy it effectively, and to measure that inside of their portals. So it's something that I've been tinkering with and learning about since I really started with HubSpot. So I've kind of had a couple years to iterate and develop some thoughts around this. And when you look at the resources that are out there, there's some tremendous resources. It's definitely the resources provided by HubSpot, but I feel like a lot of them just stay high level. They talk about the tool, they talk about positive, negative attributes, they talk about the simple things. But with a tool like lead scoring, there's so much freedom to create different lead scores that I didn't feel like they provide enough structure as to how you actually go in and execute without making a mess. So that's really what we're going to be covering today. Here's the agenda. We have the introduction. We're going to go over the overview, some of the use cases, best practices, and then the meat of the conversation is really around this multi-lead scoring system. It's something that's not necessarily new. I know a lot of people in here have experienced multi-lead score systems before, but it's something that is something I've been working on, developing some ideas around. So I'm going to be sharing those with you today. Here I have the downloadable version of the slide deck. So I'm going to go ahead and drop this in the chat if I can find it. There we go.
I love that. Real time links to downloads.
Yeah, so we can, if you guys have a second screen, you can go ahead and pop that up. There's some clickable links throughout. There is some minor differences between your document and mine. I took out one slide, and then any internal HubSpot links that lead to our sandbox that I'm going to demo some stuff in, all of that's been broken, so you won't be able to access any of that. So I'm going to give an introduction to both MO Pros, Remotish, and myself. So this is kind of like a highlight on the sponsors. So Marketing Ops is definitely one of the biggest contributors to why we're all here today. So Mike reached out to me. We'll talk about the origin story about how this kind of came about, but Mike reached out to me after a LinkedIn post and extended this opportunity. And I've just been very grateful for that, as well as for everybody showing up. As somebody who has spent, going on 5 years in the HubSpot ecosystem now, I've been to inbounds and all the HubSpot educations, and I've just listened to so much amazing content. And after, I feel like every inbound session, you just leave energized, like with these new ideas that you can go into your portal and implement. So I'm just hoping to be able to pass that forward today, a little bit of knowledge. And hopefully, no matter if you're a novice in HubSpot, you're just new to the system, or you're what we call a HubSpot super admin, power user, there should be some takeaways for everybody today. So I'm going to go ahead, and there is in your slide deck, you can click this link that's going to open up to the MO Pros membership plan page. So just one thing I wanted to highlight is that they do have a free membership as well as a paid yearly or monthly membership. I'm a member of MO Pros. A lot of the crew at Remotish, and I'm sure several other individuals in the that are participating today, but just want to go here and plug in MO Pros for anybody who's interested. It's a great community. And then Remotish. So I am part of what we call the Remotish Mafia. So we can see here's the team over here. I'm going to tell you a little bit about Remotish today. We make HubSpot awesome. That's our slogan. We're a Diamond Tier, top 1% HubSpot partner agency, and we specialize on the technical aspects of HubSpot. So we are a RevOps HubSpot partner, and really we don't do any creative outside of our web ops services. We don't really touch any creative, and even then, our clients are providing their own designs. It's bring your own design. So we are pure technical experts on the HubSpot system. So that's really where my bread and butter lies inside of HubSpot. You can also click these links. They will take you to our 3 different services. We have HubSpot Onboarding, HubSpot RevOps, which is a monthly RevOps program, and then HubSpot WebOps. One just really cool thing about our team that is not true for most other teams is that we are 100% certified on HubSpot. So every single member of our team has every single HubSpot cert, outside of the Salesforce integration, which we all have to get by the end of this month. So that's one really cool thing about working with our team. And yeah, so that's all about Remotish. If you want to learn more, you can click these links. So this is a slide about me. I did strip this slide out of the the attendee version, but this is just some information about who I am. So outside of HubSpot, I'm definitely a HubSpot super fan. I'm a fan of many people who are here listening today. And I really love HubSpot. I love my job. I love tinkering and learning and documenting. And it's just been such a growth journey for me over the last 5 years to get to this place that I'm at today. So I am a big advocate for HubSpot and teaching inside of HubSpot. That's what I love to do. Outside of that, I'm a father and a husband. So I have 2 beautiful little girls, Everly and Indy, who are my everything. This is the reason why I wake up and work as hard as I do. And I just want to share that with you guys today. So to the origin story, how did this come about? There was a post, really, let me take a step back from the post. There was a project that I worked on with one of our clients centered around lead scoring. And every model that I had really built up to this point was a single lead score model where I was trying to combine multiple types of logic into a single score. And after some discussion with the client, they were questioning whether or not we could do multiple lead scores. And then it dawned on me that yes, you can do that. And that actually makes a lot of sense. And not only can you do that, but you can use a calculation property to add all of those scores together. So we started putting out some documentation, just some strategy moving forward. And then we started to build. And there was a lot of learnings and lessons that I took away. And I hope to share those with you today. And this post was basically the catalyst for Mike reaching out to me. So this got a ton of engagement from a lot of the individuals in this session. And the copy says, lead scoring is one of the most requested items from our clients at Remotish. Almost every client that comes into Remotish is asking for lead scoring. In a recent project, I've built out a model that challenges the way but really I traditionally thought about this tool. One of the issues that I've had with lead scoring in the past is that if you try to do it, if you try to do it all inside of one single lead score, it just gets smushed together. It's difficult to understand what pieces of the logic are contributing to the overall score. And to combat that, we broke that out across multiple different scoring properties and used a calculation property to add them all together into a total lead score. And now it allows us to see how each individual lead score contributes to that overall total score in a much cleaner and efficient way. So here's just a picture of the image that went along with the post. You can click this, it'll open up. I cut off some of the copy, so if you're interested in reading everything that was there, you can read that here, as well as the comments. There was some great engagement there. So now we're going to start with a lead scoring overview. So this is kind of overview, best practices, just more if you're getting started with lead scoring, what is it and where can I learn more about it? So the 2 things that I want to point you to begin with are the knowledge base article, as well as the HubSpot Academy video lesson. So both of these are going to be great starter guides for you if you are new to lead scoring. Again, it doesn't necessarily get into strategies too deeply, but it does cover the basics really well. If you're just looking to see how does this tool function inside of HubSpot, I would always tell you to go to the knowledge base. It's a great resource. So those are linked in your document. And this is a definition from another great resource that HubSpot has. It is a bit outdated, but it has a lot of great points that they make in it. And one of them that I liked a lot was the definition. So lead scoring is the process of assigning values. That's very important. We're assigning positive and negative attributes, often in the form of numerical points, to each lead you generate for your business. You can score your leads based on multiple attributes, which are the contact or really the object properties that you have on record, including the professional information they've submitted to you and how they've engaged with your website and brand across the internet. This process helps sales and marketing teams to prioritize leads, respond to them appropriately, and increase the rate at which those leads become customers. So that's a pretty high level just overview of what lead scoring is. Now, it's important to note that the HubSpot scoring property inside of HubSpot is not just for contacts. You can also create deal-based lead scoring and company-based lead scoring, which we'll get into in a little bit. But today, we're going to primarily focus on the contact side of this. So what are the pros and cons for HubSpot lead scoring? I think of a lot of pros, and I could only think of one con. The pros are you can strategize lead scores to be unique to your use case, your process, and your data. That's really important. And that's pretty much across HubSpot. You're going to be able to customize the different tools to fit your use case. But that's the beauty of lead scoring, is that, and that's also the downfall of lead scoring, is that it's not always straightforward because it is unique on a case-by-case situation. So there is some guidelines, some best practices that you can implement, some models that we can all look at and say, okay, this is a standard model, and I can take that and I can either run with it or I can deviate from it and customize that to my own process and data. The second pro is that it allows you to very easily prioritize your leads, identify ideal buyers, increase productivity and efficiency for your sales team, close more deals, can trigger lifecycle stage and sales handoff, and you can measure and report on lead scoring and associated object data in the custom report builder. I know that these kind of got high level here. We'll certainly talk about those in more depth in a minute. Excuse me. I'm not feeling great today, so I'm trying to push through it. I appreciate all the positive energy around this though, because that was what helped get me through this today. The one con that I could think of for the lead scoring was that it takes trial, error, research, and iteration to improve the model and better understand and execute your intended use case. And that's true for almost any new advanced thing that you're building in HubSpot. It's never going to be perfect out of the gate. You have to, a lot of the times we like to take the growth-driven design, GDD methodology, and apply that in other areas. It's a great philosophy that not only works well for websites, but works for other things as well, where you try to launch an MVP, a first iteration of that, and then you continue to iterate that as you gather data. So that's really the important thing, is that we're getting it out there, we're going to start collecting data, and then we're going to start to make adjustments to that. But sometimes we expect, our clients can expect things to be perfect out of the box the first time around. So it's just really important that you communicate as you're working through an advanced lead scoring model that it's not going to be perfect on day one, and you have to continue to invest in that over several months to kind of deliver on the best execution of that intended use case. So lots of pros, only one con, but it's an important con to be mindful of. Next, we have our lead scoring use cases. So there's a lot of use cases that you might be able to, at the end of the day, drive back to lead scoring. But when I was sitting down and thinking about it, I was trying to think, how can I boil it down to the simplest or the smallest amount of use cases that could apply generally across many other use cases? And really, there's three reasons why you would create a lead score. The number one use case, which is a lot of the times actually clients think they have use case one, but they actually have use case two, which is the first use case is that the sales team is receiving too many sales qualified leads and they're not able to accurately prioritize them. We see that a lot. We see people coming in, there's just no organization to the system. People are cold calling or following up at random, and there's no process or documentation behind how you're prioritizing those leads. So that's use case one. Use case two is between marketing and sales. So the first one was just sales. Second one is marketing and sales. And here we want to increase the volume of marketing qualified leads that we're handing off. And both parties are going to be interested in that. So that's use case two, is that we actually don't have enough volume. I think of it basically as hand raisers or implicit users. So you have somebody who might go in and fill out your demo request form or your free trial form. They've raised their hand. That's use case one. You've just got too many of them and you need help prioritizing them. Use case two is you don't have enough hand raisers. You need to pump up more leads to your sales. So instead of saying they filled out the demo request form, they filled out the free trial form, we'll pass them on to sales. We're saying we're looking at the analytics for how many times they've viewed a page, how many times they've opened an email, how they fit our ideal client profile, all of those different things, so that we can create a threshold, a trigger that hands that off to the sales team. Use case three is really for experimentational purposes and to learn more about your CRM and the data that you're holding on your contacts, is for the marketing team to track key conversion points or key events to understand the demographics and engagements from leads. So that would be use case three. We kind of had a bit of use case two and use case three here in the project that I'm talking about, but we definitely leaned into use case three. We wanted to learn more about the demographics and how these leads are engaging with our CRM and our digital assets. And one important part to take out of the use case three is that we're basing that on key conversion points or key events. And we'll talk about how that plays into the custom object in a moment. Those are the three primary use cases that we have. Again, there's going to be others, but I feel like all of them can roll up into those three. So some lead scoring best practices. Number one is consider building your lead score in a spreadsheet before implementing in HubSpot. You don't have this link, and I apologize, but This is an internal asset that we use at Remotish. Every project we try to start off with documentation. So this is one way where you can have a conversation, you can build out a lead score without ever having to get into HubSpot. And a lot of times we like to do that first so that we're documenting that process outside of HubSpot. Essentially, it's the same thing. You could build this out in HubSpot. It's just a step before that. Here we're seeing all the different values, the scores, how they're weighted, the threshold for MQL, SQL, which ones we're using in that test score. And then we're just running some figures here. So we're going to have individual attributes, company attributes, some list membership, email activity, website activity, all the good stuff. So that's an example of how Remotish builds some lead scoring in a spreadsheet before we ever implement in HubSpot. Number two is to keep your scoring model simple. One of these is going to be a contradiction to something that was in that spreadsheet. But we're going to use low or consistent values. So that's a big point. And that's a takeaway just over the years that I've learned just through trial and error, is that I got ahead of myself when I first started building lead scores, and I didn't stay true to this first rule. And I would just use not necessarily super high values, but I would just weight values based on my own and personal biases of what something meant. And I didn't have any consistency between my patterns. So that's two things that I think off the top we should always be paying attention to, is making sure that you're using low and consistent values. And consistent is usually should be in increments of either 1, 3, 5, whatever you set that as. And using low values, the reason why you want to use low values is if you're using high values, it becomes very hard to see how your different attributes that you have are adding up to that total score. In addition to, if you choose to use negative attributes in your score, that can complicate the way that you're looking at that. So just one, use lower consistent values. Two is to build with a logical pattern. So you always want to, if you're creating especially a multi-lead score system, you want to try to make the logic in lead score 1, even though it's a different intention of what you're tracking for the second lead score, to follow a similar pattern so that they align in terms of when you're looking back at it, you can see, understand at quick glance without having to go in and look at the lead scores, what each of those scores mean. Third is to be judicious in your use of negative attributes. I think that's pretty straightforward. Negative attributes are definitely beneficial. There's a great use case for them. However, they make the lead score inherently more complicated because now you're not only adding, but you're subtracting. So if you're using negative attributes, you need to make sure that you're using them with very specific intention. And the last point is not to weigh values unless absolutely necessary and logical. I'm not a fan of weighing values. I think that builds like some bias into the lead score that's not necessary unless you have a great use case for it. The third one, and we'll show where this tool lives when we open up the sandbox portal, but using the refine filter condition option to make a lead score time bound or reference the number of times a value or event was true. The next one is test and improve using object index or test score criteria. We'll go over this in a minute. Oops. I want to show you the object index tip real quick. So what I'll do is I will actually go in. This is our I gotta fix this real quick. All right, so we are in our sandbox portal here. And what I mean by the object index, so this is your object index. This is where you can see all the objects and they list them all out here. You can do actions. I'm sure everybody already knows this, edit columns. But what I'll do is I'll actually create a view for myself that's centered around the lead score. So I'll put my total lead score, do that to the top, and then I'll add all the different scores that come under that. And then I'll drag the lead score type and where's total lead score? Well, you get the idea. We would put them all in here, then we save it. And then as I'm going in and editing my lead score, after I make an edit, it's going to be immediately live in this index. Sometimes it takes a couple minutes, but I'll essentially set this up. I'll make an addition or change to the lead score, and I'll come back out to this contact index and I'll see how that impacts the objects or the records that we have on file. So that's one way. You can always sort and look at who's your most highly qualified based on the score that you just created. You can look at their record. You can start to try to identify which pieces of the lead score are adding up and try to better understand the model that you're creating. So that'd be one of my best practices recommendations as well. And then third is to document and build reporting around your lead score process. I know I'm preaching to the choir here, but always rely on documentation, especially as you come to the conclusion of a project. You should always be trying to wrap that up with a nice bow and provide some documentation. And the reason why that's so important, again, I know I'm preaching to the choir, but we have seen already just in the environment that we're working out of that there's just constant turnover right now. And there's two kind of keywords around documentation that I want to focus on. It's turnover and legacy knowledge. So that's another thing that we're seeing a lot of clients come to us with, is that they've had a lot of turnover recently and that legacy knowledge has been lost. Somebody built these systems and never documented it, never took the time to go back and explain what it is and how it works. And now we have no idea what it does, and we have to go back and audit things, and it just takes a lot of time and energy. So as you're going through and building stuff in HubSpot, document. Workflows is definitely one of my favorite tools in the HubSpot kind of all the HubSpot hubs that we have. But I'm going to take one from Jen here and say that the most powerful tool that we have in HubSpot is the knowledge base. All right, so this gets into a little bit of the conversation around the multi-lead score system. So, excuse me, what is a multi-lead score system? A multi-lead score system is comprised of many individual lead scores, each designed for a central overall strategic purpose. So what are some of the benefits of using a multi-lead score system? We can easily organize scores into distinct categories, which allows for cleaner reporting. We can build targeted lead scores for a variety of strategies, each unique to themselves. And we can use each unique score that we've created, can add them all together, and we can still get a total lead score. So we're getting what we needed out of a single lead score, which is a centralization of that data. But now we also can leverage the fact that we have multiple lead scores to analyze, and we can see how every little area that we've created or we're measuring is impacting that overall goal. So the next thing I wanted to talk about is the 25 lead score limit. So I'm not sure how many of us are familiar with I'm sure most of us, but the HubSpot product and services catalog, it lays out all the different features and what you get for each hub. The Enterprise Hub has access to 25 contact lead scores. Pro has access to 5, which that's still a lot. There's still a lot you can do with that. I haven't created more than 5 to 7. So the question is, why are we not leveraging that to its fullest extent? And why are we not bringing that into our strategy? That's the limit that we have, and that's a pretty big limit. So the thing I think is that many of us might not be thinking about the fact that you can create a multi-lead score system. So while you may never use 25 lead scores, that's fine. I haven't ever used 25 yet either. The idea is just to be creative and to try new strategies. Nothing that is ever done with a lead score is permanent. And I don't think there should ever be any hesitancy around building a lead score. The only thing that you're risking by creating a lead score is the amount of energy that you're going to put into that and the resources that you're going to put into that. In terms of HubSpot and data integrity and data governance, you're not going to impact anything negatively. It's a temporary thing that if you were to go back and delete your lead score, it's going to be gone. You can also go in and make changes to it in real time. So never feel like that anything that you do with the lead score is permanent or complete. It's a playground for constant iteration to better understand your customers and identify your highest qualified buyers. So when we have a lead score, it's important to consider what are our controllable versus non-controllable variables here. And we're going to open up. So inside of the lead score, I'm going to open up an empty one real quick. So here's an empty one. So now we can look at what are the controllable and non-controllable features of a lead score. What can we control? That's very important. We can control the strategic lead score groupings. So those individual unique situations that we're trying to create those groupings for, we can be strategic in our choice in our deployment of those. We can also be, and by that, just real quick, what I mean is if you go out to these scores, we can see all the different scores. We have a blog score, a content download score, an email marketing score, ICP score. We have a variety of scores. How you choose and what you choose to measure is going to be unique to your use case, your process, and your data. Second thing is going to be your choice of custom or of object properties. So the reason I say object properties here is because you're not limited to just contact properties inside of a lead score, even a contact-based lead score. So if we were to add a criteria, here we can see it's going to be the same filter types that you see in lists and workflows, but you can access not only your contact properties, which are going to be a direct relation, but also your company and deal properties, which are going to be at least one associated company, at least one associated deal activity. So it's important to know that even in a lead score, you don't need to just use contact properties. You can use all of the object properties that exist in your CRM. So your choice of which ones you're going to use, in addition to not only the default ones that come out of the box for HubSpot, but also any custom properties that you have created. You can bring all of that into your lead score. So your use there is going to be, again, heavily dependent on your use case, your process, and your data. The use and value of positive and negative attributes, with the most important being the value of those attributes. So how much are we going to provide for each of them? What logical pattern does that follow? Does that roll out across all of the lead scores that you've created? And then your use of weighting your score, that is a controllable option, something I don't tend to do very often, but you can if you would like, and that fits into your use case. The other thing that we can control is whether or not we're finding that filter conditions. And just while we're here, what that looks like is you can really only do it under certain, but I'm going to use the page views. So we can say that contact is viewed at least one page or one URL containing, and then, for example, we can do remotish.agency. I always spell that wrong. And we can say that has viewed one remotish.agency. We can add filter criteria down here. So refine your filter condition. Again, you're not going to see this on every single criteria that you can add. It's only really available for engagement type stuff that's not going to live on your contact properties. But you can use it for website activity, for emails, things like that. We can refine by the date. So a lot of the times I like to say it's less than X amount of days ago, and that's going to create a date-based logic. The other thing that you can do is refine by the number of times, and you'll see I like to use exactly, but you can use any of them. So that's another thing that's within our control. What is outside of our control? One is going to be the filter options that we have. So we can add these criteria. However, you're going to be limited to the, all of us HubSpot experts know that this can sometimes lead to frustration when there's something that's not set up from like a data structure perspective, how you need to be able to use it in your list or your workflow or your lead score. So you are going to be limited here in terms of what properties you can use. Now, there is a lot of creative freedom. I'm not trying to say that, there's not a lot of things that you can do here, but if you're trying to get to a very particular use case and HubSpot's list logic is just not allowing you to get there, that can definitely be frustrating and out of your control. The other thing that's out of our control is the amount of filters that we can apply. So as we can see up here, we have 0 of 100. Now that's an individual lead score can only have 100 filters. We cannot exceed that. I very rarely have ever come close to that. But that is a limit that we have. We can't create over 100 filters in a single lead score. So there's 3 models, really 4, that I want to talk about today that I've kind of been playing with in terms of what are some lead score models that apply generally across all industries, all niches, all businesses. First one, everybody is going to have either an ICP or a buyer persona. So the first model that we're going to go over is a ICP score or a buyer persona score. Your company's ideal client profile. Here's a link to the ideal client profile article from HubSpot. You can read more about what that is. I'm sure all of us know. The ICP, though, is tied directly to data points that are stored within HubSpot. By analyzing those properties, This is if you don't already know your ICP. If you already have your ICP, you already kind of need you already have what you need in order to get going. But if you don't even know where to get started, a great place if you have data in HubSpot and your sales team has been using it is to analyze the properties of contacts associated to close won deals, and using those unique traits that you have, or creating an exhaustive list of those traits, to build an ICP that is tailored to the traits that are unique to your customers. While you can, every single use of like job title, company size, annual revenue, you can have different keywords that you're pulling in, or you can essentially pull in different things here. It's going to be consistent. Like everybody, at least most B2B companies, are going to be focused on job title, company size, annual revenue, industry, country, region, and then any custom properties that you have related to your ICP. So we're going to open up the model real quick and just review what this looks like. So our ICP score, again, we're going to try to keep low values, consistent values. We're not going to weigh our values. Like for me, I could say that, for example, I might consider job title for a mid-level manager, I might weigh that less than somebody who's an executive. That's one way that you could make an argument that this deserves some weight to it. However, I think that puts some bias into the equation. So I just like to do, for the ICP model, ones across the board. So the first one is job title is equal to any of. It's important here to note that we are saying is equal to, because these are acronyms. You could have this is all your C-suite acronyms, and you could have a word potentially that has the combination of CMO in it already. I don't know if that's true or not, but you could have a word that has CMO in that, and then it's going to pull anybody who has those 3 letters in a row into this score. So you can see the difference between acronyms as equal to, and then contains any of for keyword related. So the reason I say keyword is if you were to go into your CRM and looked at contacts associated with close won deals, you're going to see a lot of different people who have title, president is their title, and they're going to be across a wide variety of actual titles, like you president of or director of RevOps, director of marketing. So instead of adding every single reference that you could find to president, director, manager, all of those, we just go in and we try to weed out all of the keywords so that contains any of, we'll just pull those automatically into our score. Industry, this is very simple. You just go look and get an exhaustive list of all the industries that you serve. Annual revenue. So we can see, excuse me, we have added a contact or a company property here. Anytime you add company, or anytime you do cross object logic, so we're looking at something that's based around a context, but we're referencing company or deal or activity data, HubSpot needs to identify or create this rule that says the primary associated or at least one associated blank has. So that's what we're seeing there. Just something to be mindful of, especially if you're creating workflows. And then this isn't an exhaustive list, but here we're just saying that email doesn't contain any of our freemium. So it's a very simple score. There's nothing too complicated about this. And you could definitely take this model, this simplified model, and add your own data points that are unique to your situation or custom properties. You can tie those all in here. So that's the first one. It gives you some insight into who's your most ideal client. Next one is sitemap scoring. So this is, I'm sure people have played with this idea, but this is something I kind of consider as one of the biggest things that came out of this project was the idea of sitemap scoring. And I'll explain what that means in a minute. It's pretty straightforward, but the idea is that by tracking the engagement of page groupings through domain lead score logic, you can calculate the highest engaged website visitors using the refined filter condition within a set amount of days. So here's some different scores that we would see here. I'm going to use the Remotish website as an example. So when we say sitemap scoring, the reason why I call it sitemap scoring is that because you can use URLs. So here we'll click on the team. It's not a good one. Look at our monthly RevOps. So every single page that is related to Remotish's services is going to fall under this domain, no matter if it's our RevOps, our WebOps, our onboarding. it's going to have the front half of that domain, which is going to be all the backslashes. So we can go through very quickly and just look at our website and say, what are all the key pages that we want to track, and just pull a list of those URLs and stop at the point of the keyword that's related to what you're trying to dig down into. So what are some examples? Big one that a lot of clients use is the product score. So all your products pages, it's going to be backslash product backslash. You can pull that in, and then we can use this logic over here. Has at least one page view of a URL containing any of remote.agency backslash blog less than 30 days ago, and they have viewed that page exactly 5 times. In that event, they get a score of 5. So we have our product score is a good one, career score, our team, our leadership, the blog score is another big one, case study, webinar, any kind of downloadable content, landing pages. Those are all great examples of sitemap scoring. So inside of this score, we're going to see the logic that we had that we just saw in that screenshot. However, it's all of the logic. So here we can see that we had 2 pieces of logic for every single score. 1, they must have viewed that page within the last 30 days. And 2, we're going to look at the exact number of times that they viewed that page. So if you've done it once, you get a 1, 2, 2. And I didn't actually go in and add that date filter for all of them. That was just for example purposes. But essentially, you just create the first one, clone it, and then change to 2. It's very fast and easy. So you can get this stood up pretty quickly, and that goes all the way down to 9. We can see that all the way up to 9 is exactly, and then 10 is at least 10 times. So anybody who has a score of 10 has viewed the blogs 10 or more times within the last 30 days. One of the things, and the reason why I wanted you to see this in its entirety, was because we'll tie back directly to those best practices that we have. We want to make sure that we're creating a repeatable pattern across all of our scores. This is a really easy way to do that. The title of this session was Advanced Lead Scoring. Just because it's advanced doesn't mean it needs to be difficult or complicated or hard to understand. Actually, the easier that it is to understand, the better you've done it, the more advanced you are in HubSpot. The last item is the global form scoring. So this is in the instance that your HubSpot uses global forms for lead capture. What is that? I'm sure a lot of us already know, but for those of us who don't, forms are grouped for a specific purpose and changed. You don't have to change it on a yearly basis, but that is like a best practice recommendation. For example, you could have a form called 2022 webinars. And then the reason why it's important that it be a global form, you could definitely use a form-based lead score, even though you don't use a global lead form strategy. However, the reason why it's important is, for example, if you use one form that gated all of your webinars for 2022, the likelihood that a contact would have filled that out multiple times, and you can actually check the amount of times that they've filled that out, compared to a one-off form that you just had for July's webinar, you're only going to get that contact filling out the webinar that form once. So that's why it is important that this is a global form scoring strategy. That opens up the door to future work too. If you have a client who doesn't have that yet set up, and that's something that they're interested in, that's another project that can come out of lead scoring. So always be looking for the next thing too. And I would definitely highly recommend global forms. Again, we're going to see a very similar, consistent pattern here. We're going to see exactly 1 time, and you can also add that logic to refine by date here. And we're going to see 1 all the way up to 10. And 10 is going to say they have filled out that 10 or more times. So that's our global form strategy. Now, the last one that I want to go over is, and there's several ideas here, is the marketing email score. So I didn't actually create this one yet. We're going to do this one live. So this would be another just core model that I would say that we should be using if you're creating a multi-lead score system. And you're going to be tempted at first to go into marketing emails, because that's very straightforward. They have an option for marketing emails. Why wouldn't we start there? You're going to see when you click that each of these are tied to specific marketing emails. So while you can certainly go down that route, it would take a little bit more upfront strategy to get that into place. But if you have specific campaign that you're rolling out related to a set of marketing emails, you could come into this marketing email and build it out there. However, that's not where I would start for this use case. I would actually go into our contact properties. And one of the things that we're going to see is we have great information that's stored on the contact object about marketing emails. So it's under, email information. We have our first and our last email open, reply, send, name. We have all those, as well as the marketing emails clicked, delivered, open, replied. And I really want to hone in on these. So if I was going to go start a lead score based around marketing emails, I would not go to that email. I would come to the contact properties and I would say that the last marketing email open date, and again, you're going to always see this across, so it might be better to use click date, but there's not much we can do to get around this Apple issue. I'm sure we're all very familiar with that. So we could say it's less than 30 days ago. And we could say number of marketing email. It's not right. Marketing emails opened is, or clicked, either one works. I think clicked would actually be better. Is equal to 1. And then we're going to follow the same pattern. We're going to clone that out. We're just going to change it and change this to 2. We're going to change that to 2. It's very quick. We're going to do that again and again and again all the way until we have 10. So it's going to follow the same exact pattern we've set up in lead score 1 and lead score 2. So now if I go back to my contact object index, I've saved that view. I can come back and I can look at it. And I can say, here's my total lead score. Here's each lead score that came under that. And I know at a glance, I don't even have to go into the logic to understand it. I can say they had a 2, they opened a marketing email, they've opened 2 marketing emails, and their last marketing email open date is less than 30 days ago. Some other scores that are beneficial is company score. So that's going to be really needed in the use case of ABM. So if you have a big ABM marketing effort, you're going to want to use a company score. Deal score. Again, if you have a lot of SQL leads coming across and you're generating deals for each of them, you're going to want to be able to prioritize those. How can you do that? Not only can you create a contact-based lead score for that, you can also create a deal-based lead score. You can create a lead score around your sales activities, your calls, your meetings, your tasks, your notes, all those good things, your products or your line items. I think that's a really interesting idea. I haven't tried that yet, but I think that's a really interesting one. Custom property score. So again, you could tie that into any of the other scores when it applies to that use case. However, if you had, for example, a wizard that gates some demo or some access to your software or whatever that may be, you could tie those custom properties into a lead score to have a custom lead score that gives some insight into that use case that you have. You also have, you can create a survey score. And one of the things I just want to note here is that you can't use feedback properties inside of a lead score. Feedback properties are tied to HubSpot surveys. So the way that you need to do that is you need to map those properties to the contact to be able to use that on the contact level. That might get a little tricky. But if you use Typeform or some other integration that you have plugged into HubSpot, those are going to be coming into your contacts properties anyway. So if you use an integration for surveys, it's very straightforward. If not, there's workarounds. You can create workflows to pass that off. You can also create a workflow score, paid ad score. I'm just going to put this out there. The paid ad score is not very helpful. And the reason why, is the properties that we have in here are just not great. So I would hope to see one day this improve from HubSpot's ad end, but we can see ad interactions. There's really nothing here. I'm not sure if they will ever be able to prove this, but that would be nice to be able to see like number of clicks on the ads and things like that. But I understand that that's really complicated. So just know that there's not much you can do with a paid ad score at this point in time. You could also create a CTA score, create a list score, and then an integration score. What I was meaning there is at the bottom of these options, we can see we have the ability to choose from our Zoom integration. So if you have an integration, it might pass some data over on these options. So just be mindful of that some integrations might pass some data there. And if you wanted to, and the data was good, you might be able to build an integration score. So what other tools work really well with lead scoring in HubSpot? That's important. Workflows is definitely number one. That's my favorite HubSpot tool. Workflows, you can use lead scoring to trigger workflows or to segment contacts with if-then branches. So we have an example of what that looks like here. So here we are using the total lead score is known. So anytime total lead score is known, a contact would be actually the first time it's known, they would come down this workflow. You can't use that as re-enrollment, which is something to know. We'll talk about the custom object in a minute. It's one of the benefits of a custom object is you can use the contacts or the custom object ID is the enrollment trigger. So anytime that becomes known, which every time it's triggered and one is created, they would come down this workflow. But it is important to have re-enrollment, and the reason why that's important is because so one thing to know about re-enrollment is anytime something becomes known again, they would go back down. So if we had re-enrollment, total lead score was already known, it was 5 or something, would they then interact with the website and that increases them to a 6, let's say. Their lead score has now become re-known and they're going to come back down the workflow. And the reason why it's important to have re-enrollment is because you would not be updating your property, and it's not even for this workflow, but in some use cases that would be necessary. And I will show you that workflow in a moment. The next thing we're going to do here is branch. So those are the two things that you can really do. You can also set a lead score, but I'm not sure why you'd want to do that. You can, here we're switching between checking between MQL, which is 0 through 9, and then SQL, which is anything 10 or greater. And here we're going to set the lifecycle stage, the lead status. In the MQL version of it, we're going to enroll that contact in a sales sequence. You can only do that with Enterprise, Sales Hub. And then in the SQL, we're actually going to rotate that to sales. And then we're going to create a task and assign it to the contact owner. So that's an example of how you can use it. You just saw that, but you can use the rotate record action to rotate to sales. You can also put them through a sequence. Next one is lists. So we have over here, I use emails known here because you have to have some kind of logic to be able to save the list, but you would be using your lead score properties. So all of those can be brought in here. You can create lists of your hottest or coldest leads, and you can also break that down across your model. So if you wanted to know who your hottest and coldest leads were for a particular use case that you created a lead score for, you can do that with the list. You can use saved views. So I save views just from an admin perspective to be able to go in and check and when I'm building out the model. But you can also use them for SDRs or sales teams, BDRs. And essentially what we're doing here is we're creating filters based around your lead scores that allows them to come in and very quickly see who they can follow up with outreach. So those are the kind of the two use cases for the saved views. You can also build reports, and we will talk about that in more depth in one moment. I know I'm at 10 minutes, and I'm sorry, I want to get through all this content. So the total lead score is a calculation property that adds together all the lead scores for a total score. It's, again, we've already talked about that in depth. One tip that I would give you, though, is to double check after saving that the score was added and saved. The more that you add to this, we all know HubSpot can be weird sometimes. And there's been times where I've sworn I saved it, and then I came back a couple of days later and it did save. And then the data that I collected over those 3 days is not accurate anymore. So just make sure that you go back and double check. If you ever update it, excuse me. What's that look like in HubSpot real quick? It's going to be a calculation property, and it's just simply adding them together. So custom object tracking. This is kind of the experiment with this project. And the reason why this is important, custom objects can be used to store for a variety of use cases, but one of the use cases is to store a static record of information that's captured at a strategic point in time. So that goes all the way back to the beginning of the presentation when we were talking about a key event or conversion point. In the recent project that we had, we had a workflow, and that workflow created the object record, and it was triggered when anytime the SDR made an outbound call and the total lead score was greater than 1. It was very low threshold. Every time that became true, we knew that they had a lead score and that the SDR had called them. We were going to create a new object and we're going to associate it with that contact. Why is that important? Well, if you just had it on contact properties, you could definitely like write those properties to a set of properties where you would save that as static information. But if you don't do that, it's going to overwrite that information every time. So to create a static record of these key moments in time, we can actually go in and we can say, okay, the SDR called them, they filled out our demo form, whatever that trigger point is. And then we're going to capture all of their lead scores. Another thing you can capture is lead status, lifecycle stage. You can pass all that data so that you can see number of associated deals. You can see what that record looked like when that first call was made, how that changed between the first call and the second call and the third call and the fourth call. The other benefit to that is that every single time a new object comes down the workflow, and that's why re-enrollment is important here, it will create a new object. If you were just writing them to contact properties, you would have to set a limit. You'd have to say, I'm going to create a set of 5 properties, version 1, 2, 3, 4, and 5. And then every time this comes down the workflow, I'm going to route it towards one of those 1 through 5. And then at 5, I'm going to have to stop. I'm not going to have any more record. However, with a custom object, you would, and this is not the workflow. Well, with that custom object, you'd be able to mark that every time that occurs. So this allows us to create reporting that show the amount, and that's really the end goal, is just reporting the amount of revenue influenced by lead score, the number of leads handed off due to our lead score tracking, the number of custom object associations that contacts had, so basically the count they had of lead scores, the lead status, lifecycle stage and source reporting, scoring, breakdown tables, and more. This is purely experimental and not necessary, but I definitely think there's a lot of benefit here. So here's just I'm going to go through this really quick, some examples of reports that we've created. This one is like the count of total lead score tracking. So this is the count of objects. I've taken off all numbers because this is like live data. But you can see the lead priority score is 1, 2, 3, all the way up to 13. So that's the actual score that they came across with for their total lead score. And we can see how many of those objects were created for each of them. This is the lead score breakdown. I believe I linked this. The populating score type workflow. So this is another tip that I have, is just if you want to be able to report like this on the breakdown for example, lead score 1 and which scores are affecting that. So I took those out as well, but here you would see like marketing email score. That would be this percentage of the objects that were created. It's also in relation to contact or customers. So you can look at specific segments of your database. How we do that is through a workflow. Total lead score is known. Again, this is where we would want re-enrollment. The reason why we would want re-enrollment is because every time the total lead score becomes re-known, we want the contact to come back down this workflow. And essentially what we're doing here, let me use this enrollment trigger, is we're saying total lead score is known, then we're checking for each of those scores. If blog score is greater than or equal to 1, we want to append blog score to our new property that we created for lead score type. And I would be doing this on a custom object basis in my project instead of it on the contact level. And then if they don't meet that criteria, they'll go down the none met branch, they'll go to action to the next one. And then we're going to check the ICP, same thing. That's not true. From the content download, if it is, we'll append all the way down until you exhaust all the options. So that's how you can get this with some filter snapshots as well. This is a lot of the things that I was focused on was how can I tie this project back to revenue and customers. So here's a breakdown of the count of total lead score objects that have been created. It's the same chart that we just saw previously. The only difference is we're breaking that down by pipeline. So we can actually see the deal or the contact objects that were created that are in association to a deal record. And we can use filters such as for example, object create date and deal close date to make sure that those are in alignment. And the last one we have, I want to save at least 5 minutes for questions, is the count of lead score by lifecycle stage. So there's another example. Last one, most important one, is reporting on influenced revenue. So again, here's the filters that we use. This was an actual report, so I didn't pull in the actual sum, but essentially it's very simple. It's just the amount of that, or the sum of the amount property. We have that as just displaying as a raw number. And then the filters on the back end are lifecycle stage is any customer, deal stage is known, close date is this month, and the object was also created this month. That's going to give us insight into how much revenue we influence. Okay. Q&A. Excuse me. All right. I think Mike's going to field a couple questions.
Hey, that was awesome. Thank you so much for doing this. Like my mind was like starting to hurt a little. It's like, oh my God, there's so much to take away. And appreciate you hanging on, man. Especially for how you're feeling and stuff. So thanks for powering through with us. I know the team, it seemed like, Jen and a few others sort of helped answer some questions along the way. So if anybody else wants to jump on, feel free. You can come on screen and ask a question real quick. But Christina asked, do you ever zero out lead scores at a certain point in time? Like, for example, a lead hits an MQL score, gets passed over to an SDR to work, and the lead doesn't go anywhere. Would you zero their score and have them start over?
Yeah, I definitely think there's a great use case for that. That's why I really like the idea of, in these lead score models, you can see we use the refined filter condition so that we're using a date, we're bounding it by a date. So for example, not only have they viewed our page one time, but in addition to that, they viewed that within the last 30 days. So if that 30-day passes and it's been 31 days since the last time they viewed a page, now that score is actually going to go back to 0 by itself. So I do like to build that refined filter condition in there for that exact use case. However, if you had a model that exists outside of this, that you're not using refined filter condition, and you have some process for handoff that occurs, I definitely think that just for data governance best practices, clearing that value after it's been an extended amount of time with no sales activity or engagement, I definitely recommend.
Yeah, I think that makes sense, right? And you could always go build in, some more operational process around maybe counting the number of times somebody's MQL'd. You could build a field for that, so you can sort of have an audit trail of like, is your flow, triggering MQL, SQL hits and just incrementing like a count property or something. So that could always be interesting, right? If you are clearing stuff out, you kind of want to see how many times maybe somebody's coming back around. Probably doesn't happen that much, but it could.
Yeah, you'd be surprised. A lot of time, that's a very popular thing is reconversion. So
yeah,
I think that's a great point though, Michael.
And then Camille, would you see value in creating a list for ad interactions is known and using that as a lead score component?
Yeah, when we tried with the lead score, Camille, with the paid ad in specific, we used the Facebook ID, and then we just gave them a value of 1. So the maximum score you could have was like a value of 4 because there's only 4 IDs that could be known. It's like Facebook, Google, LinkedIn. So if your ID is known, that means at some point in time you interacted with an ad, we're just going to give you a 1. So it was like very cut and dry, simple, not a lot of can actually see who's my most qualified paid ad. But yeah, there's some merit to building some lists as well.
Very good. And then looks like we got another one. How involved were non-marketing members, sales and sales management, that kind of, or management in general, in developing lead score models? And secondary to that, how have sales embraced lead scoring into their outreach?
That's a great question. So the stakeholder that I was working with at the company was primarily using marketing. So when it came to building out the model, I was more on the marketing side. However, the use of that lead score and the process that follows behind it, building that into the saved views, communicating to SDRs how they need to be using it. We did a lot of work as well with the sales team. And there was a last part of that question that I missed.
It was has the sales team that you worked with, or did you get information back from your point of contact? Have they been able to embrace that lead scoring as a part of their outreach efforts?
Yeah, so we built that into their process. So they were kind of not forced, but the saved views that they relied on for cold calling. This was all around cold calling. So essentially what was occurring was the SDRs that were just doing cold outreach to random contacts in the CRM with no logic built behind it. So we took the same list logic that they already had, which was just kind of overall general applied. And then we added this lead score logic into it. And there's kind of forced adoption there, and we didn't have any real issue with the sales team using it. And we're continuing to iterate on this. It's still like an idea that's in evolution. But it was a bit of forced adoption there.
Gotcha. I know we're getting really close here, folks. there's a question in here about advice on how to structure the prep work on paper before building it out in the system. I think you shared the spreadsheet. I would also tack on sort of a bit of a shameless plug. Like, we do have a template and a guide that we call the Marketing Operations Playbook on the website. So if you go to marketingops.com and look under the resources there, you can purchase that template, and it has like a bunch of, it'll link to a Google Doc. You can clone it, make it your own. And then you could go through there and really start getting into the weeds on, like, in this specific situation, what do we want to do, and how do we want those lead sources to map, and how do we want scoring to sort of impact everything. So that might also be a way for you to have like a jumping off point to create documentation around that. But, as Liam said earlier, documentation is super key to all this stuff. I am so sorry we couldn't get to all of these questions. We're a bit over time now, and I want to be respectful of everybody's busy schedules. Please join us in Slack and ping myself, or reach out to Liam. I think maybe LinkedIn, or if you're in Slack with us, Liam, maybe you guys can just keep the conversation going. But I don't want to volunteer too much more of your time, Liam, but it looks like there's some more good questions.
I know a lot of the people already in here are already connected with me on LinkedIn, but they're in this, there's a little icon, LinkedIn icon here. That's primarily where I'm engaging with people, is on LinkedIn. So if you want to follow, I do post a lot of thought leadership content around HubSpot and RevOps to my page. So that's how you can quickly access that. But I really appreciate the time and the opportunity.
Awesome. Thank you, Liam. Really appreciate it. Thank you all for joining this workshop, and Remotish, thanks for supporting Liam's time today. And Liam, go feel better, man. We appreciate you.
Appreciate it.
All right. Take care, everybody.